By now, you would have heard a lot about the proposed expansion to the cruise berthing facility. When we look at the studies for the environmental impact in different countries that have considered a cruise berthing facilities, there are a number of things that come to mind. When the dredging starts, the water itself will change in color. So, for example, you may see a white cloud in the harbor during the time of the dredging. There's no guarantee how far that white cloud may travel. For example, if we look along 7 Mile Beach, where tourists are actually enjoying the 7 Mile Beach, what kind of reaction would they have if they have to bathe in the cloudy, murky, or even mucky water? The other question is, how long will that cloud stay in the harbor or along 7 Mile Beach if it reaches that area? This could be a situation that lasts several months. Overall, this could affect the tourist experience. One of the other impacts of dredging and removal of coral in the area, theoretically, is a possible change in the wave patterns. We don't know how those waves would change if a hurricane comes or bad weather comes. The waves could be bigger, finding their way into your business or your restaurant. One other concern about dredging is the possibility that the seabed could be dug up and harmful toxins could be released that were once in the seabed itself. Lastly, another concern about dredging is the possibility that sand could move into the dredged area. If sand is moving back and forth from the dredged area, then that is also a concern because we don't know how much of that sand and from what distance that sand could be dragged from. For example, there is a possibility, and I'm no marine scientist or biologist, that some of the sand along the 7 Mile Beach could be drawn away from that beach. Another item that must be explained to us is how much of the sea fans, sponges, coral, and other life will be removed from that area. It has been explained that some of those items could be relocated. But what does relocation mean? And how can such relocation destroy the natural balance of the ecosystem? And can you imagine if that big ship is docked in the harbor, when it starts to reverse or starts to turn, what damage the propellers could do? Those are some big propellers. We also need to understand the type of pollution that is caused by cruise ships. For example, it is said that cruise ships dump billions of wastewater in the sea annually. So, how much of that wastewater will be left here in the Cayman Islands? While it is still theoretical, we still don't have a full understanding of whether overall this project could lead to the complete erosion of 7 Mile Beach. So that's a summary of some of the things that we need to think about when we consider the environmental impact. Next, we need to look at what could be the economic gains of the project. First, we are told that with the mega cruise ships coming, we will have an increased number of tourists coming to the island. However, if hundreds of millions of dollars will have to be paid back by the government eventually, we need to understand whether it is only an oral promise or whether there is a written contract in place that will state specifically the number of tourists and mega cruise ships will dock in the Cayman Islands on an annual basis. It's only with a written contract that we can have any comfort. If the cruise ship owners are unable to provide this guarantee in writing, then this is not something we can rely on. The other thing we are told is that more jobs will be created. Let's ask ourselves, who will get these jobs? What if the real plan was for the mega cruise ship owners to hire hundreds of cheap laborers from other places? If Caymanians are offered job contracts at the rate of a cheap laborer, that Caymanian could probably not live off of the wage that is being offered. So yes, a job may be offered to a Caymanian, but at a rate below what it takes for him to survive with the high cost of living in the Cayman Islands. So what is the point in offering a job to a Caymanian in that case? You're offering him a wage that he can't live on. Caymanians cannot compete with poverty level salaries. Another thing we're told is that local tour operators will earn more income and get more business. The reality is that many of these tours may in fact be sold on board. If you're a local tour operator, my suggestion is that you get a written contract between you and the cruise line so that you have a guarantee that your tour will be fully booked before the ship lands at the dock in the Cayman Islands. You should also not agree to share 60% or so of your profits with the cruise line. As a local tour operator, you should be getting 100% of those profits for your efforts. Another fear I have for local tour operators is that the cruise lines could create their own companies on the island that would compete with the local tour operators. The mega cruise lines have the money to do so, where they could set up a business here where it's 60% owned by them and 40% owned by a big enterprise. This essentially means that a lot of local tour operators could be completely shut out. The other claim is that revenue will increase overall for the local businesses in the area. The reality is that the same things that are available onshore are available on the cruise ship. So for example, the cruise ship has a supermarket, cruise ship has cell phone accessory stores, the cruise ship has live music and entertainment, all at prices which compete with the actual services that are onshore. In fact, the cruise ship lines have known for a long time what the prices are like onshore. That's how they keep their prices competitive on the ship. So this explains why so many people come off the ship and never shop or never buy anything. This also explains why there are so many window shoppers, people who are just browsing and not buying. In this scenario, we must consider whether the cruise ship line is our partner or our competitor. After all, they're able to sell things at price tags on the ship below the prices that we offer onshore. And if we look at all of the shops that are supposed to be within the port area, we are told that the Port Authority will control those stores. But think about that for a second. Would you give someone $200 million or $300 million and you have no say about how the product looks? There's a chance that while the control of the cruise operator may not be explicit or express, but it could be implicit. The cruise line could actually have a significant influence indirectly over how the port operates those stores. This means that some of those stores could actually be owned and run by the cruise line or their affiliates. If some of those stores are run by the cruise lines or their affiliates, that locks you out of income as well. Even after you consider the economic analysis and the environmental analysis, you must still consider whether Georgetown is currently prepared for such an infrastructure impact. Infrastructure must first be improved with more services, more restaurants, more public restrooms, more accommodation to satisfy the influx of hundreds of seasonal workers. We also have to make available more entertainment and find a way to manage the traffic problem that will occur. The consequences of inadequate infrastructure include: 1. Traffic congestion. Currently, the Cayman Islands have a huge traffic problem. We've tried to build more roads and roundabouts, and so far, nothing has worked. Now we're considering building more lanes, and that is not working because all of the lanes go back into one lane or two lanes. Now, when you consider the impact of thousands of more tourists in the Georgetown area, that is a traffic disaster waiting to happen. The impact of so many tourists on any mega cruise ship day could lead to a lot of anger and aggravation amongst local residents. Like I say, to date, we've been provided with roundabouts, but no solutions. So, if we have hundreds of new seasonal workers who are going to support the mega cruise ships, where are they going to stay? At the moment, we have a shortage of housing in Georgetown. This means that hundreds of new workers will increase demand for accommodation. This in turn means that the price of housing may skyrocket in the Cayman Islands. Think about that. Caymanians can hardly afford a home at the moment. How will you afford a home at double or triple the price with such demand? I don't know about you, but I don't want to see 10 to 20 people living in a room or Caymanians becoming poor or homeless. The other issue with infrastructure is the lack of public restrooms. If you move around Georgetown at the moment, you'll see that there's about one public restroom. So can you imagine what will happen if there's a few mega cruise ships on any one day, along with the other regular cruise ships that come, and we have, let's say, 30,000 people or 40,000 people on the ground at one time? What if someone wants to use the bathroom? Think about that for a second. They'll have to go into various restaurants and other places asking to use the bathroom. Can you imagine what impact that has on a business? In order to create a great tourist experience for the cruise ship tourists, we also need a lot more services. Currently, we have limited services and limited space. So if we have mega cruise ships coming here and we have limited services, we can't afford to pile everyone in Stingray City. That will impact not only the natural environment, but the tourist experience. Now let's look at 7 Mile Beach. At the moment, as a resident, you can walk freely and enjoy the entire beach. However, on a mega cruise ship day, there may be thousands more people on that beach. That means, number one, your beach access means nothing. So throw away that sign. Yes, I want tourists to use the beach, but I also want them to have a good experience on the beach. It can't be a good experience if we have thousands of people on the beach at one time. That will be overcrowding. In addition to overcrowding, we may have an issue with random people selling random products to tourists on the beach. That could destroy their experience as well. This is a concern for a resident, a cruise ship passenger, and the airline stayover tourists, which brings in the majority of tourist income in this country. In order to address this infrastructure strain, the government must move ahead quickly with any revitalization plan that it has for Georgetown. Such a plan may include the government considering a purchase of some of the buildings in Georgetown. In addition to this, the government should offer incentives to the local businesses who are operating in Georgetown, or who will bring new business to Georgetown to service the tourists. And if we're giving incentives to local businesses, this must be genuine. So, no red tape and no high fees. With proper infrastructure and proper services that cater to a high volume of people, Georgetown could be a great experience for residents, airline tourists, and cruise tourists alike. Remember, if there's a bad experience, the tourist may leave, never to return. A bad experience also affects the reputation of the Cayman Islands as a tourist destination. Voters also have concerns over accountability. Over the years, we have seen the government start certain projects and stop them. The starting and stopping of projects makes the project more expensive. If we're talking about a $200 million project, possibly a $300 million project when you consider the $100 million cost of maintenance over time, you can imagine the type of expenses that we could incur if we were to halt and try to restart such a project. It could be $50 million or $100 million more. Voters are nervous about the project getting halted or delayed. Certainly, we don't want to delay or halt in a project of this magnitude, because any delay or halt in a project could leave Georgetown filled with half-finished buildings. This would be a permanent eyesore for residents and visitors alike. Now, if you're paying attention to the news, we hear news about the possibility of a recession in the US economy. If there's a recession in the US economy, that could impact us as well. It is unclear what is the time frame for such an impact. Will it be 6 months? Will it be 1 year? Whatever the case is, if there is a US recession, that may mean that the millions of US tourists that come here on a regular basis may not now have money to spend during that recession period. That means less people going on tours and less people visiting. No one's going to board a cruise ship and come to the Cayman Islands and spend what they don't have during a recession. It also bothers me that we don't know the terms of the contract between the government and the cruise ship owners. For example, what will happen if there's a delay or halt in a project? What does the contract say? Will the government be liable for damages or penalties if they stop the project? Does the government have a flexible exit strategy in those cases? Or will we be left to pay a liability for damages for $200 or $300 million? And who will pay that? And more worrying, if there's a breach of contract by the government, will the cruise lines then take over the port explicitly and expressly? In my view, it would be in the best interest of the public if we could see details of the terms of the contract between the government and the cruise line so that we can understand the types of damages or penalties that we would incur, that we would have to pay, and our children would have to pay if the government breaches the contract. In the absence of appropriate contractual provisions in that contract between the government and the cruise ship lines, we should be able to sue as voters and members of the public each politician who supported this project. When you go to the polls, you must consider these factors. Those factors are the economic analysis, the environmental impacts, the infrastructure strain. These factors help you to make an informed decision about whether to vote yes or no for the port. Don't consider just how much money you may earn, but also the environmental impact and infrastructure strain. In relation to the environmental impact, we don't want to lose 7 Mile Beach. We don't want cloudy water for a whole year. And we don't want to destroy our ecosystem or natural environment. We don't want to lose the beach. We don't want to lose our airline tourism. We don't want another traffic problem. We don't want a loss of 700 jobs that will go to cheap labor. We don't want a bad contract that makes us liable to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in damages and penalties. We have to consider where the government would find that money to pay. Will it come from an allocation from education, or pensions, or children's school lunches? An exposure to such an amount of damage could be a great burden for the government to bear, and ultimately for your children to bear. It would also be unfair if, in the case of a breach of contract, if the cruise lines obtained explicit control over the port and our tourism product. If the cruise lines have significant influence over how our tourism product looks, then that is not in our best interests. We must retain control at all times under the terms of the contract. Otherwise, the look and feel of our tourism product will only represent outside commercial interests. In my view, we simply don't have enough information. We need to see that contract. Otherwise, this project seems too much of a risk for us to bear. It is unsustainable from day one. In my view, government has left us with only one option. I am going to vote no.